Imagine your entire world crumbling down in a single phone call. I was told that my service dog, my lifeline, was about to be taken from me, and it wasn't just the HOA that wanted to take her away, it was my own community that was turning against me. I never expected something like this could happen in my own neighborhood. At that moment, everything I knew was under attack. But the real twist came when my neighbors, people I barely knew, risked everything to help me fight back. They stood with me, not just to save my dog, but to show the HOA that they couldn't take away what was rightfully mine. What happened next will shock you. Stick around because you won't believe how this all unfolded. My service dog, Luna, isn't just a pet, she's my lifeline. She helps me navigate daily life, assisting with everything from emotional support to physical tasks that are impossible for me without her. Luna has been with me through some of the toughest moments in my life, and her presence is not just comforting, but essential for my well-being. So, when I received a letter from the HOA claiming that Luna wasn't allowed to live in the community, I was blindsided. They argued that she wasn't a legitimate service animal, and that her presence was violating some obscure rule about pets and zoning. They even suggested that I had misrepresented her condition. I felt completely helpless. I knew that Luna was a registered service dog, but the HOA didn't seem to care about legal or ethical boundaries. It wasn't just an issue of paperwork, it felt like a personal attack, and I wasn't about to let them take her away without a fight. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my dog, it was about standing up for my rights and protecting the bond we shared. It all started with a letter from the HOA, one that I never expected to receive. I opened it, and my heart sank as I read through the words accusing me of violating community rules. They claimed that my service dog, Luna, didn't belong in the neighborhood, that she wasn't a legitimate service animal, and that I had somehow misrepresented her condition. The letter was cold, impersonal, and the tone was filled with authority as if they had already made up their minds about what should happen next. I couldn't believe it. How could they challenge my rights to have Luna with me, especially when she was a certified service animal? The more I read, the more I felt trapped, like my rights didn't matter. The HOA was acting as though they held all the power, and I was just a person trying to live peacefully with the one companion who made life bearable. I felt cornered and powerless, but there was no way I was going to let them take away Luna without a fight. I needed to figure out what my next move was, and fast, because I wasn't about to let them take the one thing that helped me survive each day. I can't even begin to explain the whirlwind of emotions I felt when I first received that letter from the HOA. It was as if the ground beneath me had been ripped away, and I was left standing in a storm. My immediate thought was, this can't be happening. I've had Luna for years, she's more than just a dog to me. She's my constant, my support system, and the one thing that makes life bearable on the darkest days. To have someone question her legitimacy felt like a direct attack on my very existence. The fear crept in next. What if they actually took her away? What would I do without her? How would I cope with the anxiety, the isolation, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness that always looms over me without her by my side? I was in a constant state of anxiety, replaying every scenario in my mind, each one worse than the last. The frustration began to build as I realized the HOA was treating Luna like just another pet, ignoring the legal rights I had as someone with a disability. They didn't understand the bond we shared or how crucial she was to my daily life. I felt like I was being forced into a corner, and I didn't know how to get out. But it wasn't just about me, my neighbors started to catch wind of what was happening. At first, I was hesitant to tell anyone, unsure of how they would react. But as I opened up, I was surprised by how many people were ready to stand by me. Some were furious on my behalf, others simply didn't understand why the HOA could do this in the first place, and a few offered to help in any way they could. It was the first glimmer of hope I'd felt since this nightmare started. For the first time, I didn't feel completely alone. At first, I thought I was fighting this alone. I felt completely isolated, thinking I had to stand against this giant by myself. The HOA had sent their letter, and I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, and fear, not knowing where to turn next. But then, something incredible happened. As I began to share what was going on with a few of my neighbors, their reactions were nothing short of surprising. They didn't just sympathize, they were furious. It was as though they recognized the injustice, and they weren't going to let it stand. I'll never forget the moment when one of my neighbors, Jenna, knocked on my door. She was a lawyer, and she was determined to help. "I've been through legal battles before," she said, "and I'll make sure you don't have to do this alone." Her words were a lifeline, and I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders just knowing that someone understood the legal side of this and was ready to fight. But it wasn't just Jenna. Other neighbors started to reach out, too. Some offered to help with gathering signatures for a petition, others offered to attend HOA meetings with me, and a few even began to dig into the HOA's bylaws to find any cracks in their reasoning. The real turning point came when a small group of us decided to attend an HOA meeting together. I had never felt so nervous in my life, but the support from my neighbors was overwhelming. They stood with me, speaking out on my behalf, pushing the HOA to explain why they were targeting my service dog. Their voices were loud, clear, and powerful, and with every word, I realized just how much strength I had gained by sharing my struggle with others. The solidarity I felt from them was nothing short of amazing. It wasn't just about a dog anymore, it was about standing up against an unjust system that could affect any one of us. The community wasn't just offering sympathy, they were showing up in full force. We weren't just fighting for Luna's right to stay with me, we were fighting for the values of fairness and compassion. Slowly, I began to see the real power of having a community that cares. My neighbors weren't just passive onlookers, they were active participants in a cause that we all believed in. And with every single person who stepped forward to help, I felt the strength to keep pushing back against the HOA grow stronger. I wasn't alone anymore, and together, we were unstoppable. The turning point in this whole ordeal came one evening, about a week after our community's initial efforts. It had been a tense few days, the HOA had grown more aggressive in their actions, and I could feel the pressure mounting. I was losing hope. Every time I tried to prepare for the next battle, it felt like the odds were stacked higher against me. But then, out of nowhere, my neighbor Jenna came through with a breakthrough. She had spent the last several days going over the HOA's legal documents, looking for loopholes and inconsistencies. When she called me that evening, I could hear the excitement in her voice, something I hadn't heard from her in days. "I found it," she said, her voice shaking with triumph. "There's a clause in the HOA bylaws that directly contradicts their claim that Luna can't stay here. They have no legal standing to force you out." I remember staring at the phone, almost not believing it. The tension that had been building for days suddenly shifted, and for the first time, I felt a spark of hope. Jenna wasn't just providing legal advice, she was putting the pieces together that had eluded me for so long. We now had a legal argument that could potentially dismantle the HOA's case. The tide was starting to turn, and with that newfound strength, I could feel my determination growing. But the battle was far from over. When we brought this information to the HOA's attention, I thought they'd back down, but they didn't. In fact, they doubled down, accusing us of trying to manipulate their rules. The audacity was infuriating. I could feel the weight of their resistance, but I wasn't about to back down now, not after everything my neighbors had already done for me. Jenna suggested we escalate the situation further by taking our case to the local press. She had contacts with a journalist who was passionate about stories involving community injustice, and she thought this would be the push we needed to force the HOA into a corner. It wasn't just about legal rights anymore, it was about sending a message to anyone who thought they could push around people like me. With the press involved, I knew things would get much more public, but that was exactly what we needed. The moment the story hit the local news, the pressure on the HOA became unbearable. Neighbors I hadn't even spoken to before reached out in support. The community rallied, and it became clear that this was no longer just my fight, it was our fight. For the first time, the HOA realized they were facing a united front, and their position started to look untenable. The turning point had arrived, and the momentum was shifting in our favor. But even with all the support and the legal breakthrough, I could still feel the tension in the air. The HOA hadn't given up yet, and I knew that whatever happened next would be the final test of whether this community truly stood behind me, or if they were just watching from the sidelines. It was clear now that they could either accept defeat or face the full weight of a community that would no longer be silenced. After days of uncertainty and fear, the resolution finally came, and it came fast. I was sitting at home, trying to mentally prepare for the next confrontation with the HOA, when I got a call from Jenna. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the relief in it. "They're backing down," she said, and for a moment, I thought I misunderstood her. "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. The HOA's legal team finally came to their senses. They've agreed to drop the case. Luna gets to stay. It took a few seconds for the words to sink in. My entire body felt light, as if a weight had been lifted that I didn't even know I was carrying. After everything, after the emotional roller coaster, the sleepless nights, the fear, and the countless hours spent fighting back, I was finally being told that the fight was over. The moment I heard those words, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief flood through me. But the relief wasn't just for me, it was for Luna, too. I couldn't imagine a life without her, and the thought of losing her, of being torn apart from my only source of emotional and physical support, had been unbearable. It was hard to explain just how much Luna meant to me, but I'm sure anyone who's ever had a service animal or a deep bond with a pet can understand. Luna wasn't just a dog, she was a partner, a guardian, a friend. The thought of her being taken away was too much to handle. But in that moment, it felt like the world had tilted back into place, and everything that had felt impossible became possible again. As I processed the news, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we'd come, and how I'd gotten here. It wasn't just me standing up against the HOA, it was my neighbors, my community, who made this victory possible. I had always thought of my neighborhood as just a place to live, but now, it felt like a family. They weren't just bystanders in my struggle, they were my backbone, my strength. From the moment they heard about my situation, they rallied behind me. They didn't hesitate, didn't wait for someone else to take action. They just showed up. The people who I barely knew just days before were now my closest allies. I will never forget the kindness and dedication they showed during the most difficult time of my life. Every time I felt exhausted, every time I wanted to give up, they reminded me why this fight was worth it. They gave me hope when I thought it had run out. The relief I felt when the HOA backed down wasn't just about winning the battle, it was about knowing that I wasn't alone anymore. The community that had come together for me wasn't just a group of neighbors, they had become my support system, and I was forever grateful for them. They taught me that you don't have to face the hardest battles of life alone. When you have people around you who care, who are willing to stand with you, you can face anything. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had found my place, my people. The victory wasn't just legal, it was emotional, too. I had my dog back, and I had my community. Together, we had shown the HOA that they couldn't just push us around. It was a fight I never thought I'd have to face, but in the end, it was one that made me stronger. I had a newfound respect for the power of a united front, for the incredible things that can happen when people come together to protect each other. It was more than a win, it was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is light, and sometimes, that light comes from the people you least expect. My neighbors weren't just witnesses to my struggle, they were the reason I had a chance to keep fighting. They were the reason Luna and I got to stay in our home. And for that, I would be forever grateful. Looking back on everything that happened, it's hard to believe how much has changed in such a short amount of time. This wasn't just a fight for my service dog, Luna. It became so much more than that. It was about standing up for what's right, about protecting the bond one shared with her, and most importantly, about realizing that we are never truly alone when we have a community behind us. At the beginning of this journey, I was terrified. I thought that if the HOA had their way, I would lose everything: my dog, my sense of security, and the stability I had worked so hard to build. I was ready to face a legal battle, but I didn't expect the emotional toll it would take. I felt isolated, vulnerable, and unsure of what the outcome would be. What I didn't know at the time, though, was that the strength to fight back wasn't something I had to summon on my own. It came from the people around me, people who, at first, were strangers to me, but who quickly became the foundation of this entire battle. When my neighbors heard about the situation, I didn't expect them to rally around me the way they did. Honestly, I wasn't sure anyone would care enough to get involved. But that's when I learned a powerful lesson: community means more than just living near someone. It means showing up for each other, standing up for what's right, and knowing that together, we can make a difference. Each of those neighbors who stepped forward offered more than just words of comfort. They brought their skills, their time, and their passion to the fight. Some of them offered legal advice, some gathered petitions, and others simply stood by me in the most vulnerable moments. They were the ones who pushed me to keep going when I was ready to give up, reminding me that there was strength in numbers and that the injustice of the HOA wasn't something I had to face alone. It's easy to think that when we're going through tough times, we're on our own, that no one can understand or help. But this experience has taught me the exact opposite. When we allow ourselves to reach out, when we open up and share our struggles, we create the space for others to step in and support us. I was so focused on fighting the system that I almost missed the real power of the situation, the power of a community coming together for a common cause. The truth is, I wouldn't have won this battle without them. It wasn't just about the legal victory, it was about the bond one formed with those around me. People who I had never truly spoken to before became my greatest allies, and through their support, I discovered the incredible strength that exists when we come together in solidarity. This fight was also a reminder of why we should never back down when it comes to standing up for what's right. The HOA thought they could push me around, that they could take Luna away and force me into silence. But they underestimated the power of one person with the right kind of support. My neighbors weren't just bystanders, they were active participants in this fight. And together, we proved that no matter how big or powerful an institution may seem, justice can be achieved when people come together with purpose. I think that's something we all need to remember, not just in situations like mine, but in our daily lives. Every day, we have the opportunity to stand up for what's right, to challenge unfair systems, and to be a voice for those who don't have one. And when we do that, we're not just making a difference for ourselves, we're building a stronger, more compassionate community for everyone. This experience has also made me reflect on my own role within a community. Before this, I was someone who kept to myself, who didn't always know my neighbors or connect with others in meaningful ways. But when the need arose, I saw firsthand how powerful it can be to be part of something bigger than yourself. The support I received wasn't just a one-time act of kindness, it was the result of creating relationships and fostering a sense of shared responsibility. If we want to build communities that stand the test of time, it's essential that we invest in each other. We can't just wait for others to take action, we need to be active participants in making our communities stronger, more inclusive, and more supportive. We need to recognize that it's our collective effort that drives change. I also learned the importance of resilience. There were so many moments when I thought I couldn't keep going, when the weight of the situation felt too much to bear. But I kept pushing forward, and I realized that resilience isn't about never feeling defeated, it's about knowing when to lean on others and when to keep going, even when things seem impossible. It's about believing that there's always a way forward, even when the road ahead feels unclear. And the support I received reminded me that resilience isn't something we do alone, it's something that grows when we come together and support each other through the tough times. So, I encourage you to think about the role community plays in your own life. How often do we show up for others, and how often do we allow ourselves to lean on those around us? The people who helped me during this time didn't just change the outcome of my battle, they changed the way I think about community. They reminded me that the greatest power we have lies in our ability to support one another. It's a lesson I will carry with me for the rest of my life. If you believe in the power of standing up for what's right, if you believe in the importance of community, and if you believe that we all have the ability to create change when we come together, I ask you to take action. Like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to this channel. Together, we can continue to fight for what's right, support each other in our times of need, and build a world where justice and compassion go hand in hand. You don't have to face your battles alone. When we stand together, there's nothing we can't accomplish. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Let's keep making a difference. And just when I thought things had finally settled, something unexpected happened, something that could change everything I thought I knew about my neighbors and this community. You won't believe the twist that's about to unfold. Trust me, you'll want to stay tuned for the next video because I've got some crazy stories coming your way. From shocking encounters with the HOA to unexpected alliances and a major surprise that completely flipped everything on its head, this journey is far from over. If you're just as invested in these wild stories and want to know what's next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. You won't want to miss it. I've got a lot more content coming your way that will keep you on the edge of your seat, so stick around. The best is yet to come. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss what's coming up next.